Today's project is to get started organizing this room. You can see it's kind of a mess. I got paint on the floor and paint cans and tools and whatever. It's taken 11 years to get this bed, and this was the room that got hit by termites, and I had to replace all the wood on these shelves and what have you. So that's made me start thinking about the condition of the room, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating some small shelves to fit in here. This used to be a shower, and they're going to be 80 centimeters wide by about 110 centimeters high, and I'm going to put the paint and tools on there, and then there'll be another step in organizing the room. But I'm going to be using the slotted angle metal shelving material. So here's the material. We have that slotted angle metal and a piece of cement fiber board I'm going to use for the shelves. It's left over from the termite project, and a bag of hardware that we're going to need to assemble things, the nuts, bolts, and angle brackets. I'll show you that. On top of the slotted angle metal and the shelf material we're going to use, these are the other components we're going to need. These are bags of nuts and bolts, as you can see, that are made for the slotted metal. We're going to need some plastic feet so we don't leave rust marks on the ground. Some triangular reinforcement. These are important. And the last thing that most people don't talk about is I like to use washers to reinforce key areas, because a lot of times these nuts will be small enough that they'll pull through the slots in the slotted angle metal, and yeah, so the washers will keep that from happening. A quick word about getting the right washer is you'll notice that these bolts have this square part up here, like a square collar up near the head, and you want to get a washer that the square part will fit most of the way through there. Because if the hole is too small, what will happen is it will stop like this, and the angle metal, the slotted angle metal, the bolt will never get tight against it because it will be jammed up against the washer. So when you get your washers, make sure that that hole in the center, that's the most critical thing, is big enough to allow that square collar most of the way through there. Okay? So those are all the components we're going to need. Here's the plan for the slotted metal angle iron, and what I'm thinking is making it 80 centimeters wide, mostly because that's the space I have, 110 centimeters high, which means that I can comfortably work standing up on the top shelf, and because I'm thinking about using that like a little workbench in that area. And then 30 centimeters deep, and most of this is because that's the area I have in that closet in that storage space. And this, of course, is the angle metal. I may vary the distance between these shelves depending on what I have in the end, but this is my thought. I'm thinking about putting big paint buckets down here on the bottom, and then smaller paint buckets, and then some tools. Okay, some disclaimers. I have no idea how much weight these can safely hold. It'll depend on the metal you buy and on the shelf material and so on, so that's up to you. Always put heavy things on the bottom so it doesn't tip over. That's for safety reasons. And it's always a good idea to attach it to the wall, attach shelves to the wall so they won't tip over, and especially if you live in an earthquake area. Let's look at the bill of materials. What I'm going to use is 5 pieces of 3-meter slotted angle iron, and it's light to heavy weight. I bought the lighter weight one, and mostly because our hardware store has that. 50 nuts and bolts, and these are special for the slotted metal. So the collar around has a square collar on it, and they're a certain length, so they will work nicely. This, of course, will vary with the number of shelves and supports you have on yours. The next thing are 20 washers. These are optional, but if the nuts are small or the slots are big or what have you, the nuts are really good and will add a lot of support to the shelf because the nuts, I've had them pull through the slots before. Okay, 24 support triangles. These are stiffeners, corner plates, corner braces. I find all sorts of names for them on the internet. They're the triangular shaped pieces. Shelf material, so that can be wood, wood fiber cement, and I'm going to be using the wood fiber cement. And then 4 plastic feet because I don't want rust marks on the floor. And these will give me shelves that are 110 by 80 by 30, which we saw earlier, and with 4 shelves, and my spacing right now is 40, 35, 35. This spacing is not exact because the shelf metal itself is going to take up some of the space, so the opening around there won't be that big. Okay, so we'll see that at the end. This is the cutting plan for the metal. So these are 3-meter slotted angle irons, so basically 3 yards, 3 feet, sorry, 3 meters, yeah, 3 yards, 9 feet long. They need to be cut, and so I need 4 110 centimeter long legs. I need 8 80 centimeters. So these are the horizontal pieces on the shelf, the front and back ones. Let me see if I can grab this quickly. So these pieces, so there's going to be 2, 1 front and back, 2, 4, 6, 8, and then there'll be 8 of these, 2, 4, 6, 8 30 centimeter pieces, and here are the 4, so you'll have 2, 4 legs. So that's all covered here. So I've got 5 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the first piece will be cut into 2 sections of 110 centimeters each, so 110, 110, plus that's 220, so plus 80 will give me 300, so that's 1 piece. This will give me 2 of the 4 legs and 1 of the 8 80 centimeter shelf pieces, which is 1 of these pieces. Again, we need 8 of those. Then, well, the next piece we'll do the same, 110, 110, and 80. So now we'll have 4 of our 4 legs ready to go, and 2 of our 8 80 centimeter shelf pieces. So we've got 2 of those. The third piece will be cut into all 80s, 80, 80, 80, sorry, will be cut into 3 80s and 2 30s. So that adds up to 300. We'll have 5 of our 8 80 centimeter shelf pieces and 2 of the 8 30 centimeter shelf pieces. And the next piece, the 4th piece, is 80, 80, 80, and 30, 30, so it's a repeat of the one above. We'll have 8 of our 8 80 centimeter shelf pieces. We'll have 4 of the 8 30 centimeter shelf pieces. And then the last piece will give us 30, 30, 30, 30, so that'll be the remaining 4 for that 8. So we'll have 8 of the 8 30 centimeter shelf, and we'll have a piece 180 centimeters left over to do what we want. We may want to put some additional support somewhere so we can use it for that. I've got my pieces all cut. The legs, the cross pieces across the front and back, and then the side pieces. And you can use a hacksaw, angle grinder, chop saw. In my case, the hardware store will cut these for free, so all I have to do is take my cutting plan up there, and they've got a big cutter that'll cut these, and that's it. So when you cut them, be sure to use proper safety precautions, eye, hand, and all that protection. Okay, let's look at them and we'll do some of the close-up and we'll start assembling. The first thing I did is, with the long pieces, these are the legs, is you want to get the pieces, make sure that you get the ends of these pieces that have this same distance from the bottom of this last slot to the end of the piece. You want that distance to be the same or very close to the same on all of your legs. So I've measured each one of these, each end of it, that end also, and I found the 4 that are the closest, and then I will use these, and the feet will go on here, the plastic feet will go on here. Okay, so that's the first thing to do. When you cut these, one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure you don't get it off at an angle like this. You want to cut the end very squarely, because if they're off at an angle, when you go to join them up with the legs, they won't work very well. So keep your cuts very square on the ends. When you're using these metal brackets, one of the things you want to do is, you see these marks in between the slots, these are the best places to cut, and they're about every 2 inches to 5 centimeters apart. So if you can plan your shelves such that you cut through these things, then you're going to find that the shelves are a lot stronger than if you cut through the middle of the slot, and it's just going to assemble a lot easier. The basic tools you need is some kind of a wrench to tighten the nuts, and these happen to be 11 millimeter, so I got an 11 millimeter socket, I got an 11 millimeter closed-end wrench, and I've got my ratchet, nut driver. Hand nut driver is good, and if you also have something like this, a electric screwdriver or similar, that will really help, because when you're talking about 40 some screws, nuts, bolts, they can take a while and your hands can get tired. Okay, so those are the tools you need. Well, I've got all my pieces and parts and my tools, so let's get started. So here's a bottom corner. Notice I left some space at the bottom for the leg, and you want to get this up off the ground so you can sweep underneath it so bugs don't gather underneath there and so on. Okay, so first here's one of the long leg pieces, and here's a triangle sitting on top of that, and then on top of that is our 80 centimeter wide piece like that, and I've got a bolt through here just to hold it temporarily. But you can see how it goes. It goes first the leg piece, triangle, and then the cross member. And I'll show you over here. Here is assembled. Again, the bottom of the leg piece, so the plastic foot will go here. Then we have the triangle sitting on top of there. And then we have the cross piece. And you notice that I've added a washer to this, because between this piece and this piece, the metal is just not thick enough for the bolt and the collar. There's that collar thing again. There's a square collar around it. That collar is too long, and this nut will never get tight enough without the washer. So I like the washers. I'm probably going to use a lot more of them than I have to, but it makes the shelf a lot stronger. Okay, so there that is, and then I will just proceed on this side to do that, and then we'll go to the top member and we'll do that one. Here you can see why I'm using the washers. See that that nut is not a lot bigger than that slot. So I've actually had them pull through on one side. The bolt will shift a little bit, and one side of the nut can actually go through that slot at a time, and of course theoretically it could pull all the way through. So this is why I like to use the washers, especially if the nuts are kind of small and can theoretically go through that slot. Notice how you can adjust this leg up and down. It will slide within that slot. You want to make sure before you tighten these up that they're the same place on both sides. Get that out of the way, because if they're not, the shelves will be sloped. So make sure you have, like, you can measure from the bottom of this, you can measure this gap in the hole right here and the slot right up here, and make sure both sides are the same. Here I've completed the upper corner. As you can see, I left some of the leg above. This will help hold the shelf in place so that the shelf won't slide off. So just leaving a little bit, I just push it down to the bottom of the slot. This slot, you can see it's at the same level as this slot. So I just push the bolt all the way down there. You want to set this to roughly to the height of your shelf. My shelf will be a little bit higher than this, which is good. And yeah, again, that will help hold the shelf on there. So where are we? Okay, well, we've got this leg in position and that leg in position. This is one of the top 80 centimeter cross pieces. This is one of the bottom 80 centimeter cross pieces. And we're going to replicate this, and that will be our next step. Here are the two frame pieces we've made. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these side pieces to bolt them together at the corners, and then we'll add the rest of the shelves. So what I've done is I've put some of these small pieces in the top two corners, and they're just loosely in there. There's no triangles, you notice that? And what that will allow me to do is I can now put in the pieces down here, and it's sturdy enough, it won't collapse on me. Then we'll go back in here and we'll add the triangular pieces and we'll bolt those tight. And after that we'll be able to stand it up and add the other shelves as we desire. As you can see, I've got it set up temporarily and it's stable enough to work with now. It's not going to fall over, but I have to go back and redo these side pieces. As you can see, I've only got a nut in there temporarily on each one of them. Now, here's a couple notes for you. One is you may have to move this bracket piece up and down to accommodate this side piece. If the nut is jammed in here too tightly or crooked or whatever, you may have to readjust this piece up a little bit to allow this in there. Another construction note, you'll notice that one of these pieces has to be on top. So right now the little piece is underneath, and I prefer to do it that way. I want the shorter piece to be on the bottom and the longer piece to be on top so that the shelf is better supported. Okay, so now we need to go back in and put these in permanently. So here's the first side piece that's mounted in there, at least for the triangles. And when I did this, I had to loosen these original pieces because this nut was in there crooked. The tolerances were just too tight in the holes. So loosen this up, and that allows this to move upward a little bit and allow this to fit in there more nicely. And then what I'll have to do is square the frame up and then tighten them all back down. Okay, so there's that side is all the way in. We have 3 more to do. These are still not done. And then we will have a pretty solid frame to put the rest of our shelves in there. Here's one of those rather rude surprises you find out in the middle of a project. The old package, the nuts are 11 millimeter, and the new ones, they're 10 millimeter. So I will definitely be going out to buy more washers because these are just way too small. These will easily pull through the slots. The 11 millimeter were marginal, but the 10, nah. So off to the hardware store to buy more washers. I've got the bottom shelf bracket in. I've got 3 pieces of metal in here. This one, this one, this one, these 3 triangular brackets. And why do we need 3 of them? Okay, well, let's look. This one keeps the shelf from tipping side to side. So this way, left to right. This one keeps it from tipping front to back. And you can see when I move it, the screws aren't tight. You can see that's where all the movement is on this one. And this third one keeps it from twisting top to bottom. So the top can twist like this while the bottom's stationary. So if we put this setup in each of these corners at the top shelf and the very bottom shelf like I have, it will help stabilize the shelf when it's all tightened down. Now if you put in this set of 3 on the corners, you're going to have to do a little bit more work, because on this side you've got these heads sticking up, and when you do your shelf you're going to have to put an indentation on the bottom of the shelf for at least these 2, otherwise your shelf will be sitting up off of this metal and it won't be nearly as strong. I've gotten all of the triangular metal pieces in here and the bolts and all that for the top shelf and the very bottom shelf. And now what I need to do is make sure that the frame, this bottom frame, is square. And you can see I've got it lined up on the tile here and over here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten all of the bolts that are against the floor. And that'll lock this bottom frame into position. Then I'll do it on the other side, and then we'll square it side to side, and then we can start putting in the other shelves. This is the side I just squared out and tightened up, and what I want you to notice right here, see that gap right in there between the nut and that hole, the end of the hole, the end of the slot? And let's go check this other side. And if we notice, the slot is bigger. The distance is bigger, so that means this side of the shelf is higher than this side. And what we need to do is tap this down in place so that it's the same as this side. And then we'll square out this frame and tighten it up. I know it seems like a lot of work to do this, but once you get these 4 corners all done, or 8 corners rather, all done, it's going to be a lot easier to put in the shelves, and everything will, it'll sit nicely on the floor and you'll have a lot less issues with it. So it's worth the trouble. So now with a little gentle persuasion on the hammer here on the end of the legs, I brought this much closer to the same as this side. So now we're ready to square off and tighten up the frame on the other side. Well, we're getting there. It's pretty stable side to side. It's not going to move much, but back and forth she's still pretty loose. So we need to tighten those screws and make sure that this is square to the floor when we do that. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a wall that is 90 degrees to the floor, which is kind of rare in a lot of houses, but I'm going to stand it up against that wall and tighten the bolts. If you can't do that, then you're going to need to use your square and square it off to the floor. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go stand it up against the wall and tighten those bolts down. Here it is up against my square wall. You can see by the tile line there, tile line down there, and so on, that it's pretty square. Also, before I tighten things, I want to make sure that the top shelf is the same distance from the top of the leg to this top surface is the same all the way around, which it is. I just checked that. Okay, and these I mentioned earlier. When I put the shelf on here, I'm going to have to make a divot underneath on the shelf to accommodate these heads. Maybe not these over here where it's lower, but certainly these upper ones. Okay, so I need to tighten these. I've tightened down the upper corners, all of the bolts up there, and still the bottom ones I've only got, a couple sets of them for the main frames. So, but now this thing is locked pretty tightly, so I can move it around, I can flip it over, and I'm not in much danger of radically changing the settings on it. So what I'm going to do is flip it upside down against the wall, and then I'll tighten these 4. A couple of side notes. Some people prefer to put the shelf metal in there, so this part up like this, but this way, and it will give you some more space because the shelf is sitting inside here and doesn't take up as much room, but it is not as strong, so that's one note. If you're going to store something lightweight, it might be okay. The other thing is that you may, if you want to get the maximum space out of your metal, is to move this all the way down to the floor. I don't like to do that because of rust and bugs and whatever that like to get underneath there. Can't clean out from underneath it very easily, so okay, just FYI on those. So is it going to be strong enough? Well, I weigh 88 kilos, about 200 pounds, so yeah, I think it's going to work. I've added in the 2 shelves, and actually I've cut the materials, the shelves, and let's take a close-up look. So you'll notice on the shelves I went hog wild with the triangles and the bracing, just like we did on the lower and the upper shelves, and that's because I'm going to be setting paint, buckets, and toolboxes and whatever on here, so I engineered it to the absolute max. I mean, this is made to carry as much weight as it possibly can. And so if you're going to be putting pillows and blankets on there, you probably won't have to do that, but it's up to you and your application. Okay, well, I've got the shelves cut. Let's take a look at those, and we'll set it up and we're done. A brief side note on the shelves. If you're going to have a very narrow shelf like this one, you may not be able to get the shelf in there without taking off the upper shelf to get it in there. So this was absolutely the minimum. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 holes here, and that would just barely get in a 30 by 80 centimeter piece. So that took quite a bit of twitching around to get it in there. So okay, note on that. If you make a shelf that's very short this way, you may have trouble getting your shelf piece in there. So my upper shelf is that cement wood particle stuff, and this is just a particle board, piece of wood particle board that I had left over. I don't have enough of the cement wood particle board. But let me show you what I cut it with. I used a jigsaw. You can also use like an angle grinder with a what do you call a tile cutting wheel on it, and that will work. But let me show you what I actually used, because with a tile cutting wheel I always have trouble getting a square edge on it. I used my jigsaw, and I used a really fine tooth saw blade, and this one is made for light metal, is what it's called, a light metal blade. It's a throwaway. When you cut this stuff with it, it's pretty much worn out. In fact, the last time I did this I got 16 meters and there were literally no teeth left on there. But I found this works the best because with using the jigsaw I can get a nice square edge on the board, and when I try to use the angle grinder and a tile cutting blade, I found that I can't hold it square enough to the board. Okay, so that's the trick on cutting this stuff over here. Earlier I said if you put in these top triangular pieces to keep it from twisting, you'd have to do a little bit extra work later on, and here's that extra work. You have to kind of drill out the bottom of the board such that the head of the screw will fit in there. Otherwise the board will be sitting up off of the metal bracing and it'll be weaker. Plus the fact that, if you put enough weight on here, it could split the board because, it's just being supported on these bolt heads. Okay, so I've got that done. I only have to do the top and bottom because those are the only shelves where I put in these top triangular braces. The others down here, the mid shelves, don't have those. Looking good. Okay, don't forget your plastic feet if you decide you want those. Got mine in there. I had to shim this a little bit because this used to be a shower. You can see the thing around it. Okay, so let's get the shelves on it, get it loaded up, and call it good. Here it is in place with the shelves on it. Well, you decide. I think it looks a lot more workable than it used to. Things are a lot more organized. Okay, well that was it for my DIY shelving project. I hope you found it useful and interesting in your home organization projects.